There was a study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research where they did an electromyographic analysis of 3 different types of lat pull downs. They did in front of the neck, behind the neck, and then with a V bar directly going down. And what they found was, in terms of the electrical activity between the front, back, and normal, there was Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and today I'm going to be going over some common mistakes that I see with the lat pull down that could potentially lead to shoulder pain, neck pain, and could also potentially lead to injury. The lat pull down is a terrific exercise for helping to develop your lat, hence the name lat pull down, and your lat is your latissimus dorsi muscle, that being your big back muscles right over here. The reason that a lot of people want to develop their latissimus dorsi is because if you have a well-developed latissimus dorsi muscle, that is going to give the illusion of a smaller waist, because if you get wide lats, by comparison, your stomach is going to look a lot smaller. Now, with regard to the actual latissimus dorsi muscle, what exactly are its main actions? Well, it essentially does 3 main actions at the shoulder. There are a few other ones, but the main actions are going to be medial rotation, extension, and adduction. Why exactly is it going to do those motions? Well, if we take a look at the actual anatomy of the latissimus dorsi, we can see that it attaches from the posterior iliac crest to the posterior sacrum, all the way to the spinous processes of your L5 to your T7, all via the thoracolumbar fascia, and also the inferior angle of your scapula. And then it also attaches to the medial lip of your bicipital groove. So if we take all of those different functions, we can see that because it goes from medial to lateral attaching to the bicipital groove, when it contracts, it is going to pull that muscle in and it is going to bring it into medial rotation. Also, because it attaches from medial to lateral, when your arm is in abduction, it is going to bring it into adduction when it contracts. And because the latissimus dorsi muscle starts posteriorly and then it attaches anteriorly, when it contracts, it is going to bring it into extension. So if we were to combine all of those movements, essentially, when you are going from this position here to extension, adduction, internal rotation, that is your latissimus dorsi muscle engaging. Now, there are a few things that I want to touch on in this video. The first couple things I want to touch on are a couple of misconceptions with regard to the lat pull down. With regard to the lat pull down, a lot of people have this misconception and they believe that if you do the lat pull down behind the neck, you are actually going to get better muscle activation than if you do it in front. And that is simply not the case. In fact, there have been multiple studies that have shown this. There was a study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research where they did an electromyographic analysis of 3 different types of lat pull downs. They did in front of the neck, behind the neck, and then with a V bar directly going down. And what they found was, in terms of the electrical activity between the front, back, and normal, there was no difference whatsoever between those 3 different types of lat pull downs. There was a little bit more electrical activity when performed in the front with regard to the pectoralis major, but in terms of the actual latissimus dorsi muscle, there was no difference between pulling in the front of the neck, behind the neck, or pulling straight down with the V bar. So the first misconception, people think that it's going to get a lot more muscle activity if you pull behind the neck. That is simply false. The second misconception is that if you pull behind your neck, you are going to injure your neck and your shoulder, and that is also false. It depends on your anatomy, your physiology, your bone structure, your morphology, depending on how exactly your range of motion is. If you have adequate shoulder mobility and you are performing it properly, it is not going to be bad for your neck. The problem is that most people do not have the shoulder mobility required to perform this exercise behind the neck, and if they do have the shoulder mobility required, what is going to happen is a lot of times they are going to hunch forward with their neck, and that is going to put strain on all the muscles in their neck and could potentially lead to injury. Because when it comes to the neck muscles, when you go forward, you are putting your levator scapula under tension. When your levator scapula is under tension, your levator scapula attaches to your scapula, which is going to be activated when you are doing a lat pull down. So you want to make sure that you maintain a neutral spine when performing this exercise. Now that we got the misconceptions out of the way, I want to go over some other things, and that is going to be technique. For that, I'm going to actually demonstrate the exercise for you. Okay, so now I'm going to be going over some common mistakes during the execution of the actual lat pull down machine. First, I want to go over some common mistakes when people pull behind the neck. With regard to pulling behind the neck, a lot of people are going to sit straight up and then they are going to pull, and because their head is in the way and they lack mobility, what they are going to do is they are going to bring their head forward, which is going to place a lot of stress on the levator scapulae muscle, which is going to place a lot of stress on your neck and shoulder. Right now, when I just did that, I am doing very, very lightweight to demonstrate this for you, and already I felt a pull on my right levator scapulae muscle. So you want to make sure that if you are pulling behind the neck, you are not going to shift your head forward in order to allow that range of motion. And one of the ways that you could do that is instead of sitting straight up, you would want to lean forward, because when you lean forward, you can maintain a neutral spine and still go behind the neck. This is going to be much more effective and efficient, and also you are not going to injure yourself if you perform it that way. This is only though if you have adequate shoulder mobility. For me personally, I have decent shoulder mobility. I could still break 90 degrees, but even leaning forward, I still felt a little bit on my right side. So if you feel any type of pain or discomfort, do not do it this way, because it is not right for you. You need to either work on your shoulder mobility, work on your neck mobility. You need to work on something. If you are feeling pain, you should not be doing it this way. And one real quick test that you can do to make sure that you do have adequate shoulder mobility when you are performing this is take a picture of yourself from the side. Bring your arms into external rotation. If you find that when you go into external rotation, you can see your ear from the side, then you probably have decent amount of shoulder mobility. You have enough external rotation that you can perform this without issue. But if you go into external rotation and you cannot see your ear from the side because your arm is blocking it, then you do not have adequate shoulder external rotation. You should not be performing it behind the neck. Work on your mobility first. Once you get adequate mobility, then you could attempt it, see if it works for you. If you don't have any pain when you're doing it, then perform it behind the neck. Next, I want to get into a mistake that people make when they go in front of the neck. This is another really common mistake that I see. A lot of times, people are going to go way too low. They're going to come all the way down to the bottom of their sternum. And the truth is, you do not need to go that low. All you need to do is go to the top of the chest. That is as high as you need to go. You don't need to go any lower than that. Why not? Well, when you go too low, what's going to happen is you are going to bring your arm into medial rotation. And when you bring your arm into medial rotation, you are going to be placing a lot more stress on your rotator cuff muscles. Remember, this is a lat pull down. It is intended to help build and strengthen your latissimus dorsi muscle. Your latissimus dorsi muscle is a very, very strong, powerful muscle. Your rotator cuff muscles are very, very small, and they are designed to help stabilize your shoulder. So if you end up doing a weight that you would normally do with your latissimus dorsi, and you have your rotator cuff muscles compensating, what's going to happen is that is going to be way too much weight for your rotator cuff muscles to handle, and you could potentially end up tearing or injuring your rotator cuff muscles. So when you perform this exercise, you want to make sure that when you pull down, one, you're not going too low, just go to the top of the chest and that's it. And two, you want to pull down as low as you can, that you are not going into internal rotation of your shoulder. If you go into internal rotation, that means you went too far. Now, with regard to the actual exercise itself, I want to also go over why a lot of people believe that there is more muscle activation when you pull behind the neck. A lot of people, they think that by pulling behind the neck that they get more muscle activation, and the reason being they end up feeling a little bit more pain, and a lot of people will misinterpret pain for more muscle activation, but there's a difference between the burning sensation from the pump that you get and also physical pain. If you get that burning, if you're going to failure, you're doing very, very high volume, that's normal. But if you're actually feeling joint pain in your neck or your shoulder, that is not normal. So with regard to the actual study, the one that did the electromyographic analysis of the three different pull downs, one in front, one behind, and one neutral, none of them showed any type of difference with regard to electrical activity between the three. And in terms of why those were the results, this is my own hypothesis. This was not in the actual study, but I hypothesized that the reason that there was no difference in electrical activity is because when you are performing it behind the neck, you are solely getting adduction. You are not getting any medial rotation, and you are not getting any extension of the shoulder. Whereas when you are pulling in front of the neck, you are getting less adduction, but you are getting more extension, because when you are doing it in front of the neck, your elbows are in front of your body, and then when you pull, your elbows are going to be behind your body. So if your elbows are in front and they go behind, that is extension. Now at this point you may be asking, well, if I pull behind the neck, I'm only getting adduction, and if I pull in front of the neck, I'm getting a combination of adduction and abduction. So wouldn't pulling in front of the neck give me a little bit more electrical activity in the latissimus dorsi muscle? And this is also a hypothesis of mine. There has been no study that has confirmed this, but I would hypothesize that the reason that there is no more electrical activity behind the neck when compared to the front is because even though you are getting only one action of adduction when you are pulling behind the neck, you are getting much more adduction than when you pull in the front, because you're not getting quite as much adduction, but you are getting more extension. So even though you are getting two of the three main actions of the latissimus dorsi when you pull in the front, The one action, which is adduction, you're not getting quite as much adduction as when you pull behind the neck. But when you do pull behind the neck, you are only getting that one, but you are getting maximum adduction. That is just my own hypothesis, but regardless of what I believe, the studies that have been performed up to this date show that there is no difference between the front, the back, and the V-bar when you are performing it in terms of electrical activity. But those are just a few misconceptions with regard to the lat pull down that I wanted to clarify, and also some corrections that I wanted to make that I see a lot of people doing in the gym with regard to their form. And this is not just a few people. I would say most of the people that I see doing the lat pull down, they are making one of these mistakes at minimum. So if you are the type of person that does a lot of lat pull downs into your routine, just make sure that if you're pulling behind the neck, it's not causing you any pain. If it is causing you pain, stop. If you have adequate shoulder mobility, then you could do it. If you don't have adequate shoulder mobility, start doing it in the front. Do some stretches to work on your shoulder. Once you get more shoulder mobility, then you could attempt to do it with a light weight to see how it feels. If it feels comfortable, then keep doing it. But if you are lacking shoulder mobility, do it in the front or do the V-bar and just come straight down. That's pretty much it though for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to make more of these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.